It's me. Hi, everybody. It's Joe Cioffi. It's Friday morning, almost midday, and we're going to go through Hurricane Irma from top to bottom and see what we can come up with. I'm going to just tell you from the very get-go, if you think I'm going to have an answer to the ultimate question at this point, I'm not, and no one has. You're going to see all the model variability that we've had just in the last 2 or 3 days with regards to the upper air pattern, with regards to the actual surface plots that the models have done. And this is, again, why we can't really focus too much on the specific points of the models as absolutes at this stage of the game. And we really won't be able to do that until later next week. It is just a matter of, we've figured out how this is all going to evolve. And one of the things that's happened is, and no surprise, we have Irma moving over cooler seawater temperatures. And as a result, the system's become a little more ragged looking this morning. Top winds are now down to 110 miles an hour, but it's still going to probably be a borderline Category 2, Category 3 hurricane. It has also begun a turn to the west, and that is important because we continue to emphasize the fact that this is going to take this track west and then west-southwest, and how far south it gets is going to be critical during this period where it does have a southward component of motion. Now, I want to show you, before we get to the video, because I was reading the National Hurricane Center's discussion about this. This upper low that's sitting out in the Atlantic, north and west of Irma, it is has not gone away. And actually, it seems like it's drifting southwestward. It's far enough away where it's not producing any wind shear issues. But two things that the Hurricane Center mentioned is the fact that the models today, in response to this upper low, have a little bit more shear involved, but they don't think it's going to be enough to prevent it to strengthen to a strong Category 3 or eventually to a Category 4. It just might take a little longer to get there, but those intensity questions are always a problem. The other thing is that the upper low, as it drops southwestward, may wind up pulling Irma further to the south. So this is something we're going to have to watch. This is going to be very important going forward in how Irma reacts to this upper air system that's sitting out now in the south central Atlantic. So let's get to the weather part of all this, and we'll be back at the end and we'll chat for a little bit. Satellite loop, you'll notice that it really hasn't gotten any stronger than it was yesterday at its peak. The eye, which was there overnight, it's still somewhat visible, although maybe a bit clouded over, and it's very small. You can see it here, just sort of like a pinprick there. But the system still has a fairly symmetrical look to it. Don't be surprised, by the way, if it winds up weakening just a bit. As it continues to move toward the west-northwest. I'm going to wait to see a few more visible shots. It looks like on the last few frames that the track is a little bit more westerly, but we'll wait for some confirmation later today when we get a few more pictures. So it's just north of 18 degrees north, and it's just to the west of 37 degrees west. So I don't expect much strengthening to occur over the next day or so until it gets west of 45 degrees west. And the reason for that is the water temperatures. Now, we touched on this last night, but I could spend a little bit more time this morning on it. Right in here, this is where the borderline of 28 degree Celsius water is, and it's 28 or higher is usually what you need to sustain a major hurricane. Right now, Irma is just to the north of that 28 degree water. It's just kind of straddling its way. Let me just get this. There we go. It's kind of straddling its way across 26, 27 degrees Celsius water, which it'll help it to maintain itself. Anything under 26, you start to get problems with the water being so cool that the system can't hold together. But when it gets west of 45, and particularly once it starts moving more west-southwest, I'm exaggerating there, obviously, but once it starts moving more west-southwest, it's going to get back into that 28 degrees Celsius water, and that'll probably help it to strengthen to a strong Category 3 or a Category 4 hurricane. Now, with respect to it getting any stronger, it'll probably have to wait till it gets to the west of 60 degrees west, because the waters off the southeast coast of the United States are super warm here, with some temperatures at 29 and 30 degrees Celsius. 25 degrees Celsius is 77 Fahrenheit, 30 is 86. So once it gets west of 60, or particularly west of 65, that's when you would probably, you may see this wind up getting to a strong Category 4 or even a Category 5 hurricane. But it's not going to get there until the middle part of next week, so we got plenty of time. Now, let's now move forward to the hurricane model track guidance. And they all pretty much begin that turn from west-northwest to west-southwest over the next 20. Sorry, I had a dog issue. The next 24 to 36 hours, and then it goes southwest for a little while, and then after about 96 hours, it begins to turn back to the west and then west-northwest. And you notice that all the hurricane model plots take it north of the Leeward Islands. Even the one that's the furthest south is still far enough north of the Leeward Islands that they would be spared any big problems. And the European model is on the southern end of this envelope of tracks. But they all look, fairly clustered here together. You don't really have too much variation. They were pretty steady on the west-northwest coast course beyond that once it gets to 65. Here's 65 west, so this is at 25 and 65, which we're not going to see again until in the middle of next week at the earliest. And with respect to the intensity guidance, a large number of the intensity models take this over to have this at least a Category 3, and there's quite a few of them that bring this up to a Category 4 hurricane. Most of that occurs, though, after 3 days. So we're talking, as we get to Monday and Tuesday, which would make sense, because by that time it'll be back over that that very warm water. So let's look and review on what the models did last night, and we'll start with. I'm going to start with the European, and we'll put this up. So let's go back. And we will begin with this evening. So there's Irma moving west-southwest, and then west. And the European, again, the furthest south of the models that we've looked at, and it takes it right over the northern Leeward Islands, and from there it goes west-northwestward. North of Hispaniola, so it's a little bit further north than its prior run, passes just east of the Bahamas as a Category 5 hurricane, and at this point, it begins to make its turn toward the north. So here we are at day 10. So this is actually a week from Sunday. That's how much time we have ahead of this, and there's going to be, again, a lot of variability with where this is going to go. Now, I'm going to We're going to look at the GFS. First, I want to look at the run from last night. And we're going to go back on this. The GFS remains consistent, diverging with the European as it takes it north of the islands, and pretty much in line with what the other hurricane models do. It takes it down to a Category 5 hurricane here. It strengthens it up to a Category 5 east of the Bahamas. Now, at this point, we're still moving north-northwestward toward the Carolinas, and last night's GFS the 0Z run, took it right over right through Chesapeake Bay as a strong Category 3, Category 4 hurricane, and on up into western New York. Now, obviously, if something like this were to happen, this would be not good. But again, this is one model plot in one run. I'm going to jump to the 6Z, which is the latest run we have, and you'll notice the position difference. It actually has a Category 5 hurricane with a pressure of 900 millibars, but notice how far east it is on this particular run. So there's the 6Z, there's the 0Z. And just for laughs, here's the 18Z from yesterday. All of this is for the same time frame. And that one had it up in northern Maine. Another run. We're back out east of North Carolina. Let's go back another one. And now we're off the southeast coast. Again, all of this pretty much, for the same time frame. Why all the variability? Well, that's going to be because of the upper air. And we will punch that up and take a look at that. It all is going to depend on these troughs and ridges that are in the east, and the GFS and the European to some degree now they handle the trough differently. The trough actually starts to swing out and weaken as it moves into eastern Canada. You have a ridge that suddenly builds in the Great Lakes, so it suggests that in terms of the timing on this particular run with the trough and the building of the ridges, that Irma may get squeezed out right in the middle, and that's what the overnight, the mid-cycle run did on the GFS. Now, the European, on the other hand, there's the trough on the European. Here's the trough on the GFS. They're about the same. This is for Thursday evening, okay? The European, same idea, except the only difference is that the European is a little bit faster with kicking this out. So you have to wonder, there's an upper low with another weak trough out to the west in the lower Mississippi Valley. Is that going to act as a bit of a magnet to kind of keep this straddling northward along or just offshore? Or is it not going to have any influence at all and that it winds up recurving? We don't go out past the 10th day, so we don't know. But I want to illustrate again the differences in this 10-day time frame. I'm going to just back up a little bit. Let's go to 168, so we'll have more to look at. Let's see the differences in the European in terms of how it handles the upper air. So this is the jet stream for Thursday night on the new run, and you can see where the trough is. And here is Irma. Heading probably just east of the Bahamas at this stage, and let's look at let's go back one run. Look at the difference for the same time frame that the model has. Again, another great example of how the models change so rapidly and so radically from just two runs. Here's the current run. Here is the run from Wednesday night, and they're for the same exact time frame. Let's go back another 24 hours, and there it is again. Same time frame. Each run has a different way of how it handles this upstream energy that is coming down, and also the fact that we have the issue with the ridge in terms of how it deals with the ridge. So this is the Atlantic Ridge on we're 5 model runs ago, okay? And again, we're looking at Thursday evening. So now I'm going to go 3 model runs. And you see how the ridge is even different on that? The ridge is very strong here, east-west. Now let's go to the new one. Look at the difference. Now it's more it's well out to the east, south of Newfoundland, and not as strong and not as built back to the coast. These are all the very, very important questions that we are going to have to look at going forward. let me just really quick touch on one thing. I have that water vapor imagery. Yes. Okay, so one of the factors here, here's Irma. Actually, this morning, when we look at the water vapor imagery, it looks like it's kind of trying to gear up its convection again. And it's here's that upper low we've been talking about that's been sitting northwest of Irma. Looks like it's drifting to the west and weakening slowly. So as long as that continues to be the case, there should not be any impediment for further strengthening. The other issue with that upper low is whether it will prevent it from developing that west-southwest course. So we're going to have to watch that. The other thing we have over here is there is dry air to the north, northwest, and northeast of Irma. But for the time being, it still doesn't look as if that dry air is getting terribly involved in the circulation. But everything here would suggest that we're going to stay, Irma's going to maintain strength. It might weaken just a little bit over the next 48 hours or so. And then once it gets into the area to the west of 45 and particularly west of 50, this is all warm water here, enough to support a major hurricane. And when you get west of 65, this is where you can wind up with something on the order of a strong Category 4 or a Category 5. So we'll stop it at this point, and we'll chat for just a little bit. So just stand by as I come right back. And I'm back. All right. Just to review, I hope you were watching when I was switching all the model runs from the same time frame going back over the last 3 or 4 days, and you can see how much variability there is the further out we go in time, and how difficult it is to pinpoint what exactly is going to happen. I'm getting the sense that this is going to find its way somewhere off the southeast coast of the United States later next week. And at that point, we're going to have to see, is there going to be a driver in the form of a trough or some kind of troughing in the east that will bring it up the coast, or is it going to be set up in such a way that it will wind up moving out more offshore? I'm leaning away to the idea of something going, straight west forever. That to me, right now, based on what I'm looking at, doesn't seem plausible. Hopefully that won't change. But I want to, now that we're getting close to that point where we're going to start to see this southwest motion, I want to see how far southwest this thing does wind up getting. If it gets down to 16 north, that is going to be a signal, in my view. If it gets down to 16 degrees north at about 50 west or so, that probably says to me that the risk to the Leeward Islands is increasing. And the European does do that. But the European is the southernmost of all the models. Even the hurricane plot models, the European is actually south of those models. So it might be onto something with respect to how it handles that upper low. I don't know. The GFS, equally in its stubbornness, is more on the northern side of that envelope of weather models, and it has been steadfast in its idea that it passes a few hundred miles north and northeast of the Leeward Islands, and it never becomes an issue there. So we're going to watch it through the weekend, because we're going to know soon enough, which, at least as far as the southwest motion is concerned. Raymond says, the last GFS run looks ridiculous if you want a Cat 4 to hit New York City and the Albany area. Well, that one of the things that, kind of made me laugh a little bit with the model was the insane low pressure that it has. It had a Category 5 hurricane just southeast of Hatteras. And while that's not impossible, that is incredibly extreme. and moved it into Chesapeake Bay as a Category 4. I mean, if that ever happened, that would be, that would not be good at all. Okay, and it would be a real problem all the way up the East Coast with the track just inland like that. But that's essentially the equivalent of me taking out a piece of paper and drawing my own plot and calling it a model. It has that's about as much value as it has, because you're certainly not going to use that as something to go out and forecast with. The new Euro model now says it's a Carolina threat. A new GFS model show a Gloria-like situation. Yeah, I mean, you're going to see also. Look, the further out in time, the more possibilities exist in terms of where and how the tracks evolve. So we do have to get there first. Sneaky Assassin wants to know, what do I think about the chances for a hit to New York City? Well, look, anytime there's something off the southeast coast of the United States, you have to pay attention. Particularly this whole area, of course, is obviously sensitive with regards to this because of the experience with Hurricane Sandy. I can't. I honestly, I'm still in this phase where I'm looking at this and still trying to piece it all together. I think it gets to somewhere off the southeast coast, and then we wait and see. Then we're going to have to see as we get there what kind of an upper air we have. Would I be worried about it this weekend? No, it's a holiday weekend, and you should be out spending it outside if you have nice weather where you are and having a great time. Should you check in every once in a while to see what's going on weather-wise? Sure, because we're talking 9 days away. We're talking about next weekend, not next Tuesday. So you got time in case if it winds up becoming something important. Mirtha Gunter, good seeing you here this morning. I think we're finally getting some rain. Awful Harvey. Good. Yeah, Harvey's rains are going to be moving through here. I mean, at least for my area, moving through here later Saturday into Sunday morning, and it might be anywhere from a half an inch to a couple of inches in spots, but it shouldn't cause any big problems. Do you think this is going to cause airline delays? Okay, for those of you who are new, or for those of you who don't know me, just so we're clear, I'll say this now: I do not close schools. I do not close airports or measure airport delays. That is something for that is you have to check with each individual place, because every place has its own criteria on how things are handled. So I really can't honestly answer that question. I mean, you're asking me if there's going to be a hurricane going to St. Thomas, if there's going to be airport delays. I imagine there would be, but I can't say unequivocally just the threat or whether the threat causes a problem. So you need to kind of check with your airline on that. Tornado, I think the Euro models are looking more reliable. So my initial theory from yesterday that this is Isabel all over again seems certainly plausible. Yeah, I mean, I think it's possible. I got to go back and review what the track was with Isabel. I used to have a memory for these things. I really don't anymore. Daniel Wilson just finished wiring generator disconnect switch. Murphy's Law says that I'll never need it now. Well, that certainly is a good way of looking at it. Quite true. Pugmaster, Hurricane Katrina passed through Florida onto New Orleans. Should be worry. Yes, it did. I do not see an upper air pattern that would suggest that is going to happen this time. Okay, I think that's the best way for me to answer that. From what I'm seeing right now, from what's in front of me, I would say that is not your issue, that this is not a Gulf of Mexico storm issue. If nothing changes when we get into day 5, then I would get a little worried. Abaddon. Well, yeah, I mean, let's see when we get to the 5th day here. We're at Friday, so that's Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. So, if we're into Tuesday, Wednesday of next week, we're going to start to get a pretty good picture of how this is going to go. Irma could go north into the Atlantic and end up a bad storm and head to the UK. Well, you know what? They sometimes do that as they recurve northeastward and ramble their way across the Atlantic. It does happen from time to time. Yeah, I hear you. Harvey has taken a lot out of a lot of folks, and they don't want to hear, and everybody's kind of got their a bit on edge. I think, one of the things that the Texas, what we saw from Southeast Texas, years ago when and I'm talking about back when you go back to the 90s and 80s, you didn't have this wall-to-wall coverage of everything. In fact, there was a time where a hurricane would make landfall in part of the United States, and it would be, a buried story someplace. It wouldn't even be a top story. So you really didn't have an outside feel for the experiences that some people go through in other parts of the country. Major Hurricane Camille hit in 1969. Category 5 hurricane goes into Biloxi, Mississippi. That was a big news story, but you didn't see the footage until the next day. You didn't have this live wall-to-wall coverage. We live these experiences now. When we watch live television and live newscasts from parts of the country, and we saw the devastation that happened in and around the Houston area with that incredible rainfall and what it's done to people's lives. And the death toll and the damage and everything else, so everybody's kind of now got their back up a little bit. We can see, we've seen what something like this can do under certain circumstances. So maybe in some ways it's a good thing to have Category 3 hurricanes back to back, at least on the map, because people seem to be paying attention to what's going on, and I think that's a positive, because if everybody's paying attention, then if something, if it becomes problematic, if it becomes something we're going to have to deal with, it will not be a surprise. And I just, one of the things I sometimes I see, I'll get posts from people, and I've said this before, they get upset because your forecast is a hurricane. They didn't get whatever they thought they were going to get in terms of wind and rain, and then they criticize you. And I always come back and say, well, I'm sorry you didn't get the tragedy you were hoping for. I mean, if you forecast something like this and it doesn't happen, you should be happy, okay, not upset. People actually get upset over that, and that's I kind of sort of understand the weather geek. If it's a weather person, because they kind of want to see, the weather part of the equation, but this does impact people's lives. So we have to remember that. Joker's tantrum, never seen that before. How went from tropical storm to hurricane so quick with Harvey. Well, you just saw it with Irma too. It went from a tropical wave to a Category 2 in less than 30 hours. It does happen. When you get into these rapid strengthening modes where you're losing 2 millibars or more an hour, in terms of the central pressure dropping, these things can strengthen in a big hurry. You could have something go from a Category 1 to a Category 4 in very short order under certain conditions. Charlie Bolds from New Orleans will keep watching that this is following Harvey's path headed to the Gulf. Charles, as someone who lived in New Orleans back in the 80s, I understand your sensitivity. I don't think that Irma is going to be a Gulf storm based on what I am looking at the moment. Patricia Owens, when I was a kid, lived on Long Island, New York. I remember some of the hurricanes there. We've had a smattering of a few over the years and some near misses as well. Sandy was the last one. Irene right before that. There's been a bit of a quiet period, but we've also gone many years without direct hits, so that wouldn't be too unusual if we don't wind up with anything coming up our way. Let's see. Will it hit Virginia? Seth Ross, you can ask any point in what you want along the East Coast with the same question. You can't answer that at the moment. So the best I can say is that based on what I'm looking at now, I think it will wind up somewhere off the southeast coast, and from that point, we're going to be able to determine, where exactly this thing is going. Okay, folks, I got to wrap it up here. I don't know about a live stream tonight because I'm going to be traveling, so I will see how I feel when I get there. But if not, tomorrow, of course, we will have a live stream. I'll do one in the morning and probably one in the evening as well. So just be looking forward to that. You can check all the latest on my website, meteorologistjoecioffi.com, and Angry Ben is on nycweathernow.com. And that's really it. Oh, and please have a great weekend. If you're in part of the country where the weather is great, enjoy it. This is the last vacation weekend of the summer before everybody's back to school and back to normal. And if you're in part of the country where maybe you lose a day or because of rain, it's Monday, Labor Day, here in my neck of the woods is going to be a nice summery day. I think it'll be a great beach day or a great boat day or a great fishing day. Unfortunately, I'm working on Monday, so it's maybe not the best of days for me. All right, so please have a great weekend. We will see you, if not tonight, certainly tomorrow. Have a great Friday.